Before starting to tell you what happened and how I got into this situation, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. I'm 29 years old and live in Switzerland, where I work as a cop. Basically, it's like 911. Someone calls, then dispatch sends us for all kinds of interventions. Sometimes, things you see in that job changes your perspective of what's quote-unquote normal. You meet all kinds of people and sometimes weird places too. But in general, my country is safe and I almost never carry my gun home, unless I go training at the shooting range. Also, and because it's linked to my story, I love music and driving cars. It helps me clear my mind and makes me feel good. Some time ago, I met a club of car enthusiasts, and from time to time we meet and do little road trips across the country. I'm also a very chill and calm person, and I always try to find a peaceful solution to anything, especially at work. I try to always see good in people and prefer talking to them. Okay, here starts my story. Last year, 2022, I went on a road trip with a nice guy I met through the car club. Let's call him Robert to keep anonymity. That trip was really cool and we drove almost all night. It felt like playing NFS, which was great because the lights of cities look beautiful at that time and I'm more of a night owl. After that trip, we said we'll stay in touch to make another trip someday. Weeks passed when suddenly I got a message on WhatsApp. "Hi, it's been a while. How are you? Still up for a little trip? Tell me when you're free." When I saw the message, I directly checked my schedule and found a free day. I sent him back, "Hey, yeah, sure. I'm free on Redacted. Let me know if it works for you, too." He answers, "Okay, works for me, too. Where do you want to hike?" Then I was confused. Why is he talking about hiking? I checked again the message and noticed it was written by another Robert from my contacts. Not only did I mistake the dudes by their names, but also because their profile pictures on WhatsApp looked alike. The guy that contacted me was an old acquaintance I met through some of my friends when I did some DJ set parties. It was a few years ago and we were both passionated by the same music. Then from time to time we bumped through each other at concerts. So I had just planned a day with this guy I mistook for someone else. I felt bad and didn't want to cancel because although it wasn't the person I thought, that guy was nice too and it's been a while since I went for a hike in the woods or the mountains. So I was like, "Yeah, why the hell not?" Then we started planning the hike. I didn't want something too challenging, so I made a proposition. I knew a nice hike that goes through the woods and mountains. The views are beautiful and you get to meet hikers here and there. Also, the path has multiple campfire spots where you can grill some sausages. Robert, number 2, agreed and asked me if it's okay for me to take him at the train station and we'll leave my car at the parking next to the woods. The day of the hike, I arrived at the train station where Robert number 2 was waiting for me. I looked through the place and couldn't find him. Then he waved at me. Here I got my first red flag. The guy I knew and saw in his profile picture looked different. It was Robert, but he looked sloppy. He grew long hair and had a beard. I charged up his bag and my trunk and we moved. During the ride, I noticed that Robert smelled bad. It's the kind of odor I smell on the job when I'm confronted with homeless people or drug addicts. But I noticed he came well equipped for the hike, which means he wasn't in a no-money situation. So I decided to not judge him because of his body odor and to ignore it. Besides, we'll be in the woods, so outside I wouldn't notice that. We stopped at a shop near the woods to get some fire starters, and that's when Robert asked me if I was up to change the hike, because he knew another location close to the one I had chosen, and that had some nice spots for pictures. We both carried good cameras. I'm good with the map, and I checked it on my special app. The hike was the same length as mine, but it went near a river which I found really nice. Okay, let's go check that. Finally, we parked my car and arrived at the forest. I saw some old barns there and little fields for cows. Our little trip started. During the hike, I was questioning Robert on his life to catch up time. I already knew he was a smart guy who did engineering school, but I learned he moved out from our city and found some job at a construction company where he does all kinds of calculus to build stuff. Then the more I learned about his life, the more I felt something was odd. Robert started telling me he has a girlfriend, but they were going through some hard times, and he thought she might leave him soon. Then he continued saying that he missed some days at work because he felt depressed, and because he wasn't sure it pleased him anymore. He said he might get fired. I was trying to cheer him up and keep him focused on good stuff and advised him to consult if necessary. He asked me about my job and how I react with dangerous people and stuff like that. I wasn't reassured by all this conversation, but I always get all kinds of questions from people, so I can't tell I was shocked. Also, during the walk, he sometimes looked a bit off, like a robot. At some point near the river, we found what looked like ruins from an old mill, around 1920 to 1880, I'd say so. It was a cool spot, and I took a pic or two. But we didn't see any people on our path, and the sky got cloudy and it started to rain a bit. Luckily, I was well equipped. I carried everything you needed in this kind of place: water, food, fire starters, first aid, and a knife. We kept moving until we found a campfire spot with a wooden table. We decided to stay there and eat. I asked Robert to get some wood while I'll set up the table and look for little branches to maintain the fire. Robert puts his bag on the table and starts to show me tools he got with him. He grabs a big handsaw, puts it on the table, then he takes out 2 knives. One of them was a really big one. Switzerland's law is permissive regarding knives, in my opinion. I was surprised to see this kind of knife because it's a 3-hour hike and we're not staying here for the night, nor hunting something. So I decided to pull out the knife out of the knife holster I had attached to my belt to go get the branches. Robert looked at me and then he said something in a surprised tone that froze me to the bones. "Oh, you took a knife too." Immediately, my mind started racing. 2? What does this mean? Why wasn't I supposed to get a knife when we planned to go into the woods and make a campfire? Robert suddenly leaves to get what I asked him, and I got an uneasy feeling. It's like my whole body was in alert mode, saying me something is going on. I'm used to being around dangerous people at the job, but it's different when you're working fully equipped: bulletproof vest, gun, pepper spray, and you're with your partner. In the situation I was in right now, we were alone in the woods and we didn't see anyone on the path. From that moment, I decided to keep both my eyes on Robert and keep him in sight all the time, especially his hands. That's what you learn at the police academy. People always use their hands to do harm. Moreover, I decided to keep a minimum distance in case he tries to do something. A few minutes later, Robert comes back, puts all the branches he grabbed from the trees, his knife still in his hand. He looks straight at me and just stands there. Suddenly, he said, "I'm sorry." His tone felt empty of emotions. Immediately, I got up and looked at him. I was sure he was going to run at me and try something bad. I got a rush of adrenaline. Then he started to mumble something I could barely understand. "We're both here in the woods, alone. We got knives. I'm sorry." What does he mean? Why does he act that weird? Then Robert continues, "Let's hug." My body gave me even more alerts. Why does he want to get close to me while he's holding a knife in his hand? Is he trying to do something bad? Why would I hug him out of nowhere? Then my mind told me I've got to get out of this situation quickly, but without making him suspicious. I wanted to leave this place and go home. I finally replied like nothing happened. "No worries, man. Let's make that fire, eat something so he can get home before going completely wet. But I didn't want to get close to Robert. I asked him to get more branches because the ones he got me were wet. After he came back, I told him the fire starters didn't work well in the rain and it might be a better option to pack our stuff and head back to the parking. He first looked skeptical and disappointed, but agreed. We packed everything and left the place. I didn't want to talk to him on our way back, but I didn't want him to notice something was odd, so I just kept talking like nothing happened. From that moment, his tone changed a bit, seemed colder to me. I kept him in my sight. After all, we were still alone in the woods. He kept being very negative towards life and people. It made me think he maybe was suicidal in some way. I was happy I did not carry my gun that day because I was afraid he might try to do something because of that. Once we got back to the parking where I finally saw people, he asked me if I could give him a ride. I refused, arguing I just got an urgent call from someone and needed to leave. After all that, I kept asking myself, was he trying to do something? Was he just afraid by the situation? Maybe it was odd for him, even though we knew each other and even partied together. Was he planning something? I mean, we were alone, in a place he knew better than me, and he was a really smart guy. All I can tell you is that I blocked him after that and decided to contact our common friend. I knew he was close to Robert, so I explained him the whole situation. My friend told me that Robert was going through some depression and was feeling bad lately. I told him that I can't do anything legally to help him without his consent, but I advised my friend to call him and make him see someone. A few weeks after, my friend had a discussion with Robert, and apparently Robert was open to see someone about his problems. Thank you for reading my story. Let me know what you think about all this. I'm still confused to this day. I might be making my mind up, but I saw many people with similar reactions to Robert, and I'm not reassured about this.
I was 22 and living on my own for the first time when this happened, mid-90s. I had just gotten off work around 11 p.m. To reach my apartment building, I could either walk on the sidewalk, lit with street lamps, decently trafficked, or cut across this communal garden, pitch black, set back from the street. I saved about 1 whole minute of walking time by cutting through the communal garden, but being young and stupid, a lot of times I took the shortcut. That night, I got that weird feeling to not take the shortcut. I kept to the sidewalk, but there's no one else around. When I got past the garden, all of a sudden, this large man pops up from its exit path. There was no way he could have been in front of me or just behind me as I was walking. I would have noticed him. The only logical explanation was he had been hiding in the pitch black garden. A drunk who had been sleeping it off? No, my body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I began walking faster. My dad had taught me to always carry my keys in my fist with the key pointed out in case I needed to punch someone, so I had that. But I'm 5'4" and probably weighed 110 pounds. This guy was tall and big. My only chance was to outpace him. I'm speed walking at this point and I feel him matching my pace, getting closer. He's breathing heavily. I feel this angry energy coming off of him, but my apartment building is right there, so I put on a burst of speed. When I reach the entrance, 2 people are leaving and hold the door for me. And him. I don't know why I didn't tell them I thought this guy was following me. My mind froze and I was just trying to get inside my apartment. Plus, I was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid. Besides, it only took a couple of seconds for them to be out the door. I had missed my chance. I'm climbing the stairs as fast as I can. It's a 3-story building and I live on the 3rd floor. He's climbing the stairs too, still right behind me. I get to my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right side, where I live, and 4 on the left. I pass by apartments 1 and 2. He's still right behind me. I stop at apartment 3, where I live, and he stops in front of apartment 4, where I know he doesn't live. He hasn't said anything, just breathing hard. I think there's no way I'm going to open my apartment door and have him push me inside and rape me, or worse. He also hasn't knocked on the door of apartment 4. Worth noting is that the apartments are U-shaped, with mine and my neighbor's door being very close together. So I bang my own apartment door as loud as I can, but yell my neighbor's name. "Hey Kevin! Let me in!" This startles the guy, even more so when my own apartment door doesn't open. But Kevin's does. Kevin sees the guy standing right in front of his door and asks what he wants. The guy starts mumbling something about the wrong apartment, but I have my own door open so fast that I'm inside of my place in a flash, locking the door behind me. I grab my cordless phone to call the police, but I hear Kevin through the door, telling this guy he needs to leave. The guy does. Kevin knocks on my door, asks if I'm okay. I thank him, say that I am, but inside I'm still frozen, adrenaline pumping, scared. I thank him again and tell him to have a good night. Lock my door again. I have my phone in my hand, ready to call the police, but I start trying to rationalize it again. What exactly happened? A guy followed me home, but then said he had the wrong apartment? Are the cops going to care about something minor like that? I try to calm myself down, but I'm also berating myself. Why didn't I run the instant I felt him following me? Why didn't I tell the people we passed when the front door opened that I thought I was being chased? Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin that the second he opened his door and saved me? He could have let me inside his apartment. Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin that the second he opened his door and saved me? He could have let me inside his apartment and we could have called the cops together. But because of my stupidity, everything felt so ambiguous and I was questioning myself. A couple of weeks later, I'm visiting my grandparents, and my grandfather's reading the paper. He tells me that a woman was raped in the apartment building across the street from mine. It's the same guy. He had multiple convictions for sexual assault and had recently been released on parole.
This story happened 3 years ago, around the time that COVID started, so it was a while back, but still worthy of a post. It was early 2020 and I'd just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it and their commute to work was long. So they moved out and the house was uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, around a 40-minute drive, and my sister pretty much rented it to me for free. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked towards my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking that it might have been mine, since I'm a smoker, but after looking at the brand name, I realized that it wasn't mine, and threw it away. I didn't think much of it and just shrugged it off as some asshole throwing it at my curb. I went on with my night and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was pissed off and thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked. But since I didn't know who it was, there was nothing I could do about it. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off as I was approaching. That night I was watching a movie on my laptop, and it was pretty late, past 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood, and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much of it. Around half an hour later, I was surprised when I heard chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa and walked to the front door to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard the two approaching my door and reducing their talking to a whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the doorknob being shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they had walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you can move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while I was staring at them, frozen in fear, and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room, where I pushed a table up to the door and called the cops. As I listened and expected the two to come inside any minute, I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realized that they couldn't get in, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find who it was, but were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't too keen on staying there, so shortly after I moved out. My sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. Thank you for tuning in to My Mox Horror. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have a scary story that you would like me to narrate in a future video, feel free to email it to me via Outlook. Again, thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe.